Hey loves, so this video today was supposed to be a discussion about the posters for the Rings of Power that just dropped on February the 3rd, 2 days ago. After recording the video, it ended up being an hour and 20 minutes long. So this is just a note to say that the video is going to be split into two parts, and this is just part one, which is why I'm recording this now like in selfie mode in the dark because yeah, heads up, it's a lot to talk about, but I hope you'll enjoy part one, and part two will be along very shortly. It'll hopefully make it a bit more palatable, but I hope you will enjoy the stuff that I discuss. Also, this is just a heads up that there is quite a bit of swearing in this video. If that's not your cup of tea, then you may want to click away. But I'm not going to censor myself. This is how I express myself, especially when I'm enthusiastic about something. And I'm not doing this video for work. I'm doing it in my spare time. So if you don't like swearing, then maybe don't watch this. If you don't mind swearing, then fuck yeah, let's go to the second age. I'm excited. All right, loves, I feel like this is going to be a little bit more high energy than my previous video because Tolkien fans, we were fed this week. Oh my goodness. 3rd of February, so 2 days ago, Amazon just dropped it all. They just dumped it all on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, and they were like, guys, you gotta get hyped for the Rings of Power because this shit is actually happening now. And oh my god, I was losing my mind. It's a pretty special time to be a Tolkien fan in general these days because we're getting content, like whoa, that's mad. But yeah, I'm in a really good mood because of that, and because of getting to like flail about it with Tolkien fans, and because I got this sweater on sale today and I'm really happy about it. €5, like what, from H&M. I'm okay, I'm good, I'm fine. So Amazon released 23 character posters. They don't show any faces or character names or actors or anything. Just some wonderfully Easter egg-y shots of characters and their hands. And you get to see some of the amazing costume and design work, which is so heartening to see how much care they're putting into all of the different design elements. And it's been so fun to like speculate with fans about what we see, like what hands look like, what's on them in terms of like rings or no adornments, in terms of whether they're holding anything or not holding anything at all, what their clothes look like, what kinds of stitching or motifs are on their clothes. um, and so before I like really dive in and talk about the posters, I just want to say a big thank you to the fans who I was talking about with on Twitter, because my fellow co-host of the Tolkien Experience podcast, Luke Shelton, was chosen as one of the fans to drop one of the posters a little bit early before Amazon started uploading them. He was among several fans who were asked to do that. I know Fellowship of Fans was Knew Better Do Better, Nerd of the Rings, One Ring Net. Who else? There were quite a few different fans who got to do this. And it was really wonderful. And so Luke hosted a space on Twitter, and we spent an amazing 2 hours with a whole group of different fans, literally just poring over the photos, the posters, and sharing all our different ideas about them. So because when I talk about the posters now, I honestly am not sure if I'll be able to separate, my ideas from everybody else's. I just want to say a blanket thank you to everybody for all of your thoughts on that day. So thank you to Luke, thank you to Tolkien guy Jeremy Edmonds, to Fellowship of Fans who was there, and to all of the contributors who were in the space and who spoke. Who was there? Kathy from One Ring Net, Eliana, Robert, Tessa, Stoat Smith. Oh God, there were so many. There were so many of you. I can't remember all of your names, but thank you so much for sharing all of your ideas. It was great. It was such a fun 2 hours, and I I have to be honest. It's been not an easy start of the year for me. It's just kind of like been mentally and emotionally a little bit rocky, and now we're in exam period for me. I'm doing a master's, so it's really like high intensity. Um, And I was honestly genuinely I was flagging a little bit in terms of my, I guess, like energy when it comes to Tolkien fandom and just like in general and enthusiasm, and like this was such a boon. This is great. This was a wonderful way to spend a Thursday. And hey, it's a in the United States it's Super Bowl, I think, next week, on Valentine's Day. I don't know. I'm not from the US. I don't know when you guys do things, but I know that Super Bowl is always when the big trailers from the American production companies come out. So probably there's going to be a new Multiverse of Madness trailer, and hopefully we can get a Rings of Power teaser, please. Especially because One Ring Net said that usually this kind of poster dump precedes a teaser or trailer by a week. So I'm praying that we get some kind of visual content. Visual moving content that is, moving pictures. That would be nice. So I guess like the first thing to do before diving into kind of like talking about the pictures is, I guess, discussing some of the things that I first noticed. I have a handy dandy cup of tea here because we are spilling the tea on. No, that's a shit joke. I'm thirsty. So let's talk about this. The posters were really interesting because they had such a profound focus on hands. Um, some hands were holding things, some hands were not. Some hands, like it was really interesting because basically what the hands looked like, their position and what they were holding, actually can give you so many like small insights into the characters. So like, some characters had very soft hands, very gentle hands, and combined with their clothing, you were kind of like, oh, this is probably a noble character. And then other characters had very very dirty hands, and you could think like, you're already getting an idea of like, for example, occupation and class, which I thought was really interesting, and to see that there's like a diversity of that as well, because we have highborn, we have lowborn, and contrasting that with what the characters were actually holding in their hands. It was curious because some characters, some had swords, some had fruit, apples or berries, which we'll talk about in detail later. One thing I was super interested in was the rings. it was it was really curious to see who was and who wasn't wearing them and what that could imply about the characters. Um, I thought it was curious how they had both rings that were plain and rings that had gems on it, because I think it was Luke who pointed this out when we were talking, that the rings of power, most of them are described as having gems on them, and the thing that made the one ring unique was the fact that it was plain. It was just a plain gold ring. Plain gold ring on his finger he wore. That's a really good song, by the way. Anyway, a lot of the rings in those images had gems, but many of them were also unadorned. And I thought that's very clever because, you're basically disguising the rings of power in amongst all of these characters, because we don't actually know, among them who is bearing a ring of power and who is just bearing a ring. And for me personally, like it also made me think about I guess the role of rings being not just like a plot device, but also like a thematic one. Not saying that it's just a plot device in Tolkien either, because obviously like there's a lot of thematic and metaphysical heft behind the concept of the rings, but in the I'm speaking on like of the narrative dimension. I feel like I'm curious whether this might mean that the show could possibly be diving into the idea of rings like as more richly, basically, because rings are symbols of status, rings are promises, rings are heritage, passed down through the family line. So it could be I think it could be really interesting if the idea of rings in general, especially because so many rings are gifted. A lot of them are inherited or gifted, like nowadays we just buy rings all the time. I usually buy rings. I'm really sad I don't have any rings right now. I left them all in Singapore when I moved to Europe because I'm stupid, and packed my bag last minute and then forgot my pouch of rings, and now they're all like 12,000 kilometers away from me. Suddenly I know how Sauron felt. So, I don't have rings, but all of these characters do. Or most of them. I just like, yeah, I think it could be really interesting thematically if the show explores that. I don't know if they will. I feel like it could be cool because it's also like, you know, it's in the title, and I feel like it's a nice one. Artwork in every aspect of the art, the storytelling, the characters, the design, the title, like everything kind of ties in and has some sort of thematic link. So it would be cool if a show called like Rings of Power talk a lot about rings, especially because, you know, like as I was saying, like, you know, rings have a lot of different meanings. One of them being, you know, giving of a gift or a promise. And as we know, Mr. Lord Evil, when he goes to seduce the elves of Eregion to make the rings of power, comes in the guise of a emissary of the Valar in the west, and he goes by the name Annatar, which means Lord of Gifts. So I don't know. I hope they lean into the whole rings thing because I personally think it's pretty cool. It's the other thing that I wanted to talk about, which was definitely something. This was definitely Luke who brought it up first, and I thought it was a great point. Was telling us a lot about the material culture of Middle Earth with the way that the posters were done. You know, in terms of what people were holding or carrying, such as the one that Luke was given to release early was of a what I think is a hobbit. It's probably Lenny Henry's character because the character's hands were dark brown, so I'm assuming it was probably Lenny Henry because he's rumored to be one of the hobbits. And the other characters who seem to have like hobbit like tendencies, they didn't look like they could be played by a black actor, so it's probably Lenny Henry's hobbit. That's what I think. And it was this character was holding a map, and interestingly, in a script that, you know, being the nerds we are, we've been trying to decipher all of the different scripts hidden in the costumes and things, and it was in a like a pictographical script, which was really interesting. And so Luke was pointing out how it's really cool that we're seeing, like, you know, bits and pieces of material culture in a lot of these different posters, and I quite agree. And I also think that you can see that a lot with the textiles, the different textures that we're having, the different kinds of, you know, embroidery. Like the design work is fantastic. It's so good. I'm really really impressed actually. And I'm personally really impressed by the, you know, the range, the diversity of the kinds of clothing that there is, and the color, because, you know, as much as I love the Peter Jackson films and the design, which was phenomenal, everything was like white and brown and gray. I the colors were muted, and I get it. Like the color palette, the film had a specific design aesthetic, but a lot of, like, there wasn't, in my view, a lot of range and diversity in the representations of the textiles and the colors. Like, it was gorgeously done, but it's really nice to kind of see that this show, like, its design choices are kind of going in another direction, and they're exploring, I guess, something that's a bit different. It's kind of in the space where it doesn't feel like a massive departure, but it also doesn't feel like it's exactly the same kind of thing. You know, like they're going with some really bold colors here. As we'll see, one of the characters is like gold. He is a one goldy boy. And like I personally couldn't see that in Peter Jackson's aesthetic. So it's nice to see like such a range of clothing in this one. And like, I should probably just put in the disclaimer here that it's because Peter Jackson's films are, you know, it's not the only media representation of Lord of the Rings. Obviously, the Lord of the Rings, or The Hobbit for that matter. There's the Bakshi film, there's the Rankin Bass as well. But like, you know, Jackson's is the one that's like most predominant. I don't think that's contestable. Really, is the most predominant visual representation of Tolkien stories that's very globally well known. So, you know, I think there's always going to be a comparison to that because this is the first big budget visual adaptation of Tolkien's texts. Or I mean, this is also, I think it's very tenuously to be called an adaptation because there naturally will have to be a lot of original material since it's the Second Age, and Tolkien's writings are sporadic and contradictory. If anybody's ever read the Unfinished Tales, History of Galadriel and Celeborn, oh my god. Y'all look up what Celeborn's original name is. That's not PG-13. I'll share other thoughts about content and rating later, but I just wanted to like throw in the disclaimer that, you know, when I make the comparisons to Peter Jackson's films, it's really just because that's kind of like the preeminent visual representation of Tolkien in our pop cultural milieu. And also, I was introduced through the film, so it's kind of like the first aesthetic I had, which interestingly did not actually impact how I viewed the characters when I read the book. Which I mean, hey, credit to my imagination. I like that it was it was able to not be so influenced by the films. I think the only character I imagined who no, the only two characters I imagined who in the book looked exactly like the film were Aragorn and Gandalf. I think they were the only ones that were the same for me. Everybody else was different. My Legolas has always had brown skin and dark hair. Like that's just how I imagined him the first time I read him, and that was after watching Orlando Bloom in all his beauty on the screen. So I don't know, my brain does things, and I'm glad. I'm glad I wasn't influenced by the films. It's cool because then I can have two things to enjoy. You know, I can enjoy the films for what they are. I can enjoy my book imagination for what it is. It's nice. I've gone on so many tangents. It's time to talk about the posters. I have them on this handy dandy tablet. Uh, I promise I'm not that bougie. I don't just have a tablet for a tablet's sake, okay? It's useful for highlighting PDF documents. Literally, the only reason I'm saying that is because one time I had this tablet in class for a presentation, and this kid was like, oh my god, they're so fancy, they have a tablet. And I was like, bitch, this was on sale on Amazon. I saved up fucking money for it. Anyway, let's open the gallery app and let's go. Scroll past my manga screenshots. And hey, if you guys like Kuroshitsuji, reach out to me because that's my favorite manga and I love it. But we're not here to talk about Kuroshitsuji. We are here to talk about the Rings of Power. So let's go through the posters. I'm not gonna talk about every single one. I'll show them all and kind of, I guess, point out the things that really like stood out to me in particular. So hopefully this is nice and clear. This is the first one. It is of a character holding a dwarven axe. I think this is a super cool one because one thing, like the gold dusting on the fingers, is a very cool touch in my opinion. The character is also wearing several rings, which is interesting. But what I thought was coolest was okay, the hammer, the war hammer, is pretty awesome. But there is text on it, text which if I zoom in, you can see a little more clearly. So I looked it up, and to be frank, like I'm novice, like generously an intermediate with Tolkien's languages, but I'm not amazing. So I wasn't sure whether this was Kirth or Angarthas, um, which were kind of which were like the letters and different versions developed. There was Angarthas Daeron by the elf Daeron. There was Angarthas Moria by the dwarves of Moria. Turns out it's Angarthas Moria, as somebody on Twitter pointed out to me. What's their name? I think they're not their handle, but their display name is Tengwar Teacher. I'm not sure. I'm so sorry. They confirmed it's Angarthas Moria. I figured out the first word, which was awaken, and the last word, which is stone. And the full thing is awaken sleeping stone. And it kind of highlighted something that's I found weird. And I was talking about it with a friend of mine on Twitter, how like when the original title sequence was aired earlier in January, on the title, the like in inside the all the letters of Rings of Power was inscribed stuff in Tengwar, and several people on the internet were able to decipher what that said, and it was the ring verse in Sindarin, which was interesting. It was very fascinating. As we know, the ring verse, all that we have of it is the English version, one ring to rule them all, and the black speech Ashnazg Durbatuluk. Those two. And then this one was interesting because it had been translated into Sindarin. And so like clearly there was that attention to detail to do the Tengwar and then to translate it into one of Tolkien's constructed languages. But it was interesting because on this axe and in a couple of other texts in this poster series, it's English. It's English written in Tolkien's scripts, which me and my friend were talking and we were like, that's weird. And it feels like it might be deliberate. I'm not sure entirely why, but it feels strange for them to have dropped the ball on this if they took so much care in the title sequence. You know, if they took care to translate in the title sequence, why not for the posters? I'm not sure why. It doesn't quite make sense to me because it's not even for the fans, you know, because the fans will Tolkien fans are nerds, okay? Like they will decipher whatever language you put it in, they will figure it out. So I'm not entirely sure why, but this was one of the instances of that. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know why it's in English, but it's in English. But hey, at least they're using the script. So the next poster is this one. It's a character, very gold. I am like 90% sure that this is Sophia Nomvete's character. I hope I'm pronouncing her surname correctly. I've never heard it said. I think it's Nomvete. Um, because they just, I don't know, I follow her on Instagram, and I've seen some pictures of her, and these kind of feel like they could be her hands. I love that they're dusted in gold as well. I saw that that she might be a dwarven queen of some sort, so that's pretty cool. But it's nice. I do like the fabric design. Like, you know, you can see it's kind of like these like waves, almost like ribs. Like not ribs. You know, like gills, like mushroom gills. Like it looks like that, and I really like it because like that's a really interesting. It's an interesting textile choice because that kind of fabric, it folds beautifully, and it's very soft. If it's made of the material I'm thinking of, the name of which escapes me, it's wonderfully soft and falls beautifully on the body and feels great too. Um, but I like the idea that like that it kind of almost looks like mushroom gills because it kind of speaks to the different way that, you know, nature influences different aspects of costume design. There's another one later on that looks like wood, and I like this because it's kind of like, you know, what grows in the kinds of like, you know, dark places or caves where dwarves would do their work and build their halls. It's, well, you know, fungi is one of them. So it's very, I think, I'm not sure if that's a deliberate choice or if it's just something that I'm interpreting, but it's a very cool choice nonetheless. I like it, and it would be very nice to bring the natural element into the dwarves as well. I think again, in the Jackson films, I think there was a tendency to kind of have a more, I guess, a sense of design that was much less in touch with the natural world, which was like, I guess it's understandable since, you know, dwarves aren't necessarily creatures of the trees and the fields, but I mean, mountains are in the natural world, and, you know, mountains and caves, they have their own ecosystems. And just because dwarves were forged out of, you know, rock by Aule doesn't mean that they can't be in touch with the ecosystems and the areas that they inhabit too, right? So I don't know. It made me think of mushroom gills, and I hope that it's like actually a deliberate design choice because I think it would be cool. We have this one. This one is pretty cool. I saw this and I was straight away, I was like, that is Galadriel. That has to be Galadriel. Oop, oop, oop. There. It looks so cool because it's just like the cut of the armor looked more feminine. So I was straight away thinking like, yeah, it's gotta be her. But also, my lord, the dagger. That is those are the two trees. Absolutely. That is Telperion and Laurelin intertwined into a dagger. And as somebody pointed out, there are three gems. Um the three Silmarils, which is like, I mean, I love that because, you know, the three Silmarils, the three hairs from Galadriel's head that she wouldn't give to Feanor. Like, I don't know. I think it is the perfect Easter egg, and I think you see this in a few of the other designs. You see the hilt. There are these like holes in the hilt of the dagger. I noticed this design choice of kind of, I guess, like this negative space in a couple of the other swords. Um, I think it's really interesting. It's probably just part of the entire design aesthetic, but I find it fascinating and unique and different from what we've seen so far. So I really like it. I love this poster. Oh boy, this guy. This Okay, this is the one I was talking about. This is Goldie, the golden one. Gold fellow. Okay, full disclosure, when I first saw this, I was like, oh my god, that has to be Arpharazon because it's so gold. And his epithet was like, he was like, yeah, I'm Arpharazon the Golden. I have opinions about Arpharazon. But, you know, like as we kind of were talking more on the day, and discussing kind of, I guess, who the characters would be, I had noticed it, but I had kind of like blanked out the fact that there are couple of 8-point stars on on this guy, which is very very Feanorian of him. So Feanor, I was gonna say something very rude. Uh, I was gonna say high elf, and then I was gonna say clusterfuck, and then I was like, what's something in between them? I don't know. I'm like a Sith Lord. I deal in absolutes. Feanor, like one of his symbols was the 8-pointed star. And like realistically, the only character in the Second Age who would wear an 8-pointed star is Celebrimbor, who is the son of Curufin, who is the son of Feanor. So Celebrimbor is his grandchild. The only other character than Celebrimbor that I could foresee having, and I will talk about that because I actually think that it's visible in the costume of who I think is playing Elrond, is Elrond. I think he's the only other character who could realistically think about having a Feanorian star, because in the First Age he was, as a child, he and his brother Elros, who would go on to be the first king of Numenor, were captured by Feanor's two eldest sons, Maithras and Maglor. I'm not going to go into the entire backstory of like all of that, but he as is the only other Second Age character who could have a connection to the Feanorians and want to wear their symbol. Want to wear their symbol because they are contentious legacy. And I also say that because there is precedent. So if you go back and watch the Fellowship of the Ring, the Peter Jackson one, you'll see that in the Council of Elrond, in that council like area, on the dais where they put the ring, there was a Feanorian star. So, like I don't, it's not an out there design choice if that's what they've done. And some other things to notice about this were a couple of fans, again, I'm so sorry, I can't remember, there was so much discussion, I can't remember who said what, pointed out that the embroidery on the wrists of Goldilocks Celebrimbor here appear to say in Cirith Elbereth. It would be a nice touch if it's Cirith, because it kind of shows, I guess, Celebrimbor's link to the dwarves and Naravi, the dwarves of the Misty Mountains. And it's nice if it says, Elbereth, and then he's wearing a lot of rings. One of them has a gem on it and a little crown, as you can see, which was pointed out by, what was her name? Or their name? It started with L. It was I'm so sorry, I can't remember their name, but it started with L, and they made a really good point about how this ring has a little crown on it. I hope that shows okay. Which is kind of like, a mark of like noble lineage. I think it was Jeremy as well. Like I noticed this too, but Jeremy said it publicly about how this other ring has like what appears to be like a bird of prey on it, which is like, I'm not sure the symbolism of that, but I think it's pretty cool design choice because that's awesome and I want one. I have major ring envy, and if there's any merchandise that comes out of this show, it better be like a whole fuck ton of rings that you can buy in a set and wear on all of your fingers like you are yourself the Lord of the Rings, because like I can see what Sauron was going for. If I have 10 fingers, then I need at least 10 rings. That's what you have fingers for. Like, what else are you gonna do with them? Like, write things, type on your phone? No, you have fingers so you can wear rings. Duh. So let's move on to the next poster. This is an interesting one. It is a character holding a staff with a city on it. Now, there's been a lot of speculation. Some people are saying that the city is Gondolin, which would be an interesting thing. I can't remember if it was Fellowship of Fans or Tolkien Guide who said this. I saw it on Twitter today. Like, pointed out that if it is Gondolin, it's interesting that there's like this wing motif on the sides because of Eärendil's house in Gondolin. I can't remember the exact name because I'm like of all my First Age knowledge, I'm rustiest on Gondolin to be honest. It had something to do with the wing. And also it's interesting if it is Gondolin because like, so some people are saying that this character could be Elrond, and like the wings are interesting too because his mom turned into a bird. And then Numenor is the winged crown, and Elrond's brother Elros is the first king of Numenor. So I mean, it would be interesting if it is Gondolin. I mean, like Elrond, like his only connection to Gondolin is like a hereditary one. Like he was never there or anything. It was fallen by the time he was born, that is. But it would be interesting if it's like a legacy kind of thing. Personally, when I first saw it, I thought it was the scepter of Anuminas, so like the scepter of the king. Scepter of Anuminas is the scepter of the king, right? I'm having a moment. The scepter that the king wields in Numenor, which is the scepter of Anuminas. It's gotta be. Or is that what it's called in the Third Age? God, Tolkien, why do you do these things? It's the Numenor scepter. I'm gonna call it that. That's what I first thought it was. But then, like, the clothing doesn't really look like regal or anything. So yeah, it's hard to say. And this character is also wearing a ring, an unadorned one. So again, keeping things vague. And that's it for part 1. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like. If you feel so inclined, then subscribe, and you can hit the little bell to be notified of the next video. Feel free to follow me on Twitter as well, where I will be yelling a lot about Tolkien, as I do all the time anyway. So yeah, thank you again for being here. Ciao.